Welcome to our first key focus areas update of 2022-2023. We'll be looking at breakdown trends and contextual refereeing, foul play in the head contact process, as well as the use of yellow cards in context, specifically intentionally offending versus repeated infringements. The specific areas we'll look at from the breakdown are around arriving player entry on both sides of the ball, the actions of the Jackler, and in foul play, we'll examine the head contact process and actions under pressure. The first trend we're seeing is with Jacklers joining the tackle too early, making them tackle assist. This makes it very hard to get into a position to jackal as they have to come through the gate and release. But when this player particularly does, he's not in a position to lift the ball, creating a slow ball situation and potentially secondary infringements from both sets of arriving players. When presented with this picture, some officials have been getting it wrong, but again, to be on the same page, when we're looking at the Jackler, if they are not part of the tackle to begin with, they have to be in a position to lift the ball. And there we make our decision based on their ability to demonstrate that they can indeed lift the ball. Like we see here, the player is not in a position to lift the ball and then reloads onto his feet. And from a positive point of view, the first action from the Jackler should be a strong position and able to lift the ball, like we see here from number 7 from Kamloops. As we look at it again, the picture the player presents is not getting involved in the tackle and trusting the tackler and tackle assist to clear the traffic. As soon as the tackle is made, he's in a position to lift the ball straight away and does so and is off and running. To summarize on the Jackler, at times, players are getting themselves attached onto the ball carrier and the ball before the tackle's made, which makes them a tackle assist. That makes it very, very hard to effective turnover as they have to be on their own side and offer that clear release. If they are indeed able to wait for that tackle to be complete and their first action is to get on the ball in a strong position to lift the ball, they can be rewarded. Moving into arriving player entry, a lot of the entry issues from both the attacking support and defenders in and around the ruck can be related to Jacklers either being always illegal, never in a position to lift the ball, and referees being too tolerant, or on the other side, Jacklers being in excellent positions to lift the ball, not being rewarded, and subsequently we have a long ruck with lots of bodies coming in the side and leaving their feet. One of the trends involving arriving players has been attacking support players overrunning the point of contact and entering through the side. As we see here, the player in gold who enters the frame to support the ball carrier gets the running line long, overruns the point of contact, and rather than being on one of those green dots, is not able to square up and has to remove the threat from the side. One of the issues with these attacking side entries is they do often let defenses off the hook and at the same time slow the momentum of the game down as a lot of penalties against the attack go. Often this year, some of the clear and obvious side entries from the attacking support have been missed, which have led to other problems as the defense has to find another way to contest, which is often illegal, creating the subsequent or secondary infringements, which can be frustrating for both players and officials. A positive example of a player slightly overrunning the point of contact is here. Coupled with the ball carrier's work on the ground to release the ball and get into a better position, the arriving support player is able to stop his run, square up, and then protect the ball on his feet from his own side of the ball. This not only avoids a penalty or a dangerous clear out from the side, but it creates pretty quick ball and the attack is able to continue their momentum. And the benefit of heightened awareness about attacking and defensive side entry from both players and officials is not only the production of quick ball, but also the maintenance of a contest. Here we see a slight overrun from the blue support player. However, he's able to adjust, square up, and protect the ball, and remains on his feet, which still allows for a contest, as we see Gold clearly on their own side have a crack at a counter ruck. Unsuccessful in terms of turning the ball over, but creates a bit of front foot momentum for the defense. So again, the arriving players on both sides entering with both feet clearly behind the ball on their own side is beneficial for both attack and defense over the course of a game. All of the actions on both sides of the ball are pretty much impossible to observe all at the same time. Therefore, we will look at a contextual approach to refereeing the breakdown that hopefully will make sense to players, coaches, officials, and spectators. One of the ways to apply contextual decision-making to the breakdown is to differentiate between collision types. Those collision types have been broken down into green, yellow, and red collisions. First, we'll look at a green collision. A green collision type is often the result of a successful launch play, either from line-out maul or from scrum. Here we see the balls taken down quickly from the line-out, and the ball carrier is able to find a half gap with support across the gain line, and the result is quick ball. When reading a green collision, the expectation is quick ball, so as long as the tackler doesn't end up factoring in the speed of the ball, the priority jumps even beyond the breakdown to space, and the officiating team can start looking at the inside and outside defenders, given that that ball is going to be quick in 90% of situations. In a yellow collision type, we generally see the ball being worked to the edge and the ball carrier getting to a gain line neutral position with some support. The second priority becomes the Jackler over the ball, and we ask whether or not we see them in a position to lift the ball. The sooner the collision type can be identified, the more effective the identification of the second priority can be. In this case, the second priority is the Jackler. We ask, are they in a position to lift? We observe, we decide they've been cleaned out, we can play on. If we feel they were in a position to lift and were denied a clear turnover, we have a decision of holding on available to us as well. In a red collision type, often the ball carrier is caught behind the gain line with limited support. In this case, we do not see it, but often this can lead to support players coming from in front of the ball, so side entry can be a priority. With the expectation of a turnover being high, we can zoom in on the actions of the ball carrier and the attacking support. Not all collisions in a game of rugby will look exactly like this in terms of green, yellow, and red. However, having a process before the collision and identifying what your second and third priorities are going to be going into that breakdown gives you time and space to make a decision that's easy to follow. It may not always be right, but at least the players, coaches, and stakeholders will understand how you got there. This can provide the referee the opportunity to play on from what could be deemed as an infringement, but hasn't had a material effect on play. So here we see a yellow collision type, limited support, gain line neutral. There is a Jackler about to get in a position to lift. They're a little bit long. They're not in a great position. The clean out from one of the players is from the side. However, there is a second player in a legal position. As long as there's no foul play, play on is available to the referee here. The benefit of identifying the previous clip as a yellow collision is that we can zoom in onto the Jackler and ask if they are in a position to lift the ball. If the answer was no and we deem the clean out not to be foul play, play on is there for us. If we think that they would have been in a position to lift, if not for the actions of the side entry, then we have a side entry decision available to us as well. So again, it's not about being right 100% of the time, but it's about giving a chance to narrow down the different actions that can be observed. But again, priority number one is always the tackler not on the way. Ultimately, if there's a clear act of foul play, that takes precedence over any breakdown decision making. Sometimes collision types are not as simple as dividing them into three categories. Here we have a green collision as the ball carrier has made a line break. There are two defenders. The support is debatably late, and we have to make a decision on whether or not to give a turnover or penalize an off-feed action. Using a process like this is designed to give us time and space to observe what the expected outcome should be. Let's take another look at that clip. As the tackle is made, we can see the tackler, number 7, going to ground and using the tackled player and the ground in order to get onto the ball. There is a secondary Jackler on their feet in the picture. So the question becomes, did the tackler impact the contest, or was the turnover always going to happen? Regardless of your decision, rightly or wrongly, identifying the collision and the priority before the tackle is made will give more time and space to make that decision. Next, we move on to foul play and the head contact process. In BC and around the world, we use the head contact process outlined by World Rugby to govern how decisions around head contact can be made, including head contact in a tackle involving ball carrier or tackler, as well as any head contact that can occur in a ruck or maul. We'll go through a couple of local examples just to clarify a process that can look a bit daunting on the surface, as it was also designed to clarify decisions made for a television audience, but we will look at it from a common sense community perspective. So this is our first example. As number 10 takes the ball to the line, we notice he's a bit upright, as is the tackler. That's a good trigger for there might be head contact about to occur. The first step of the process is to observe whether or not head contact has occurred. This also includes contact with the neck and the throat area. From this angle, it's pretty clear that neck contact has occurred between the tackler and the ball carrier. The next step is to determine whether or not there was foul play. Basically, this means, was the situation avoidable? In other words, was the tackler at fault? We see the ball carrier is running normally. The tackler is a little bit high. We can establish that there is fault from the tackler here. For this contact with the head or neck to be considered unavoidable, we would have to determine that the ball carrier initiated contact with the tackler and that there was nothing the tackler could have done. In this case, it's clear that the tackler, although bent at the hips and knees, reaches out with his left arm. The next step is to determine the degree of danger. Since we do have direct head and neck contact, we must determine whether or not the danger resulting from the force was high or low. Fortunately, a lot of the force is absorbed by the tackler and it becomes quite passive as the ball carrier is brought to ground. We would consider this to be of lower force, so although it's direct neck contact, we would consider this to be low danger. However, because it was direct neck contact, we start our decision at yellow card, and finally we move on to the last step, which is considering any clear and obvious mitigating factors. To emphasize clear and obvious, we'll watch in real time. We're looking for a change in direction or sudden change of height. Nothing is clear, therefore mitigation does not apply. From going through our process, we've seen direct neck contact that was not high force, giving us a decision of yellow card. There was no sudden change of direction or height or dynamic to mitigate down to a penalty. The decision, as was in the referee's post-match review, should be yellow card. In another example, at times head contact can occur from an upright ball carrier and an upright tackler making head-on-head contact. Although head contact was not a result of a swinging arm or a shoulder, we follow the same process. Has head contact occurred? Yes. Is there foul play? We must determine whether or not there was anything the tackler could have done to avoid the head contact. The key is to look right before the collision. We see an upright tackler who's not significantly bent at the hips and knees. Therefore, we must say that they could have gone lower. Therefore, it was avoidable and foul play has occurred. Next, we move on to degree of danger. We've already determined that we've seen direct head-on-head contact. Therefore, we must move on to the force, whether it be high or low. Fortunately, the collision does not happen at high speed. The player does make head-to-head contact, but it is not high force. High force often looks like a collision in high speed, resulting in a whiplash effect, or a player immediately dropping to the ground. Finally, we look to any clear and obvious mitigation, changes in direction, changes in dynamic or height, which must be clear and obvious. It's unclear whether or not the player takes a last-minute step inside or changes their height significantly. Therefore, mitigation does not apply. An upright head-to-head tackle with direct head contact at low force comes in at a yellow card. With no clear and obvious mitigation, we stay on yellow card. The process is slightly different for acts of foul play that are deemed to be reckless, meaning the player ought to have known that head contact was likely to occur. Here we see a player leaving a ruck and choosing to re-enter a ruck at high speed, resulting in head contact. From one view on the field, or even from one camera after the fact, it's often difficult to gather all the facts required to make a correct decision following the head contact process. But again, referees and assistant referees in the community game must base their decisions on facts that they have observed rather than opinion or things they may have felt happened. In this case, a second angle is required to confirm whether or not head contact has occurred. Situations like this prove that often something can be observed from the touchline, which may not be picked up by the referee or the assistant referee. A note for coaches and spectators in the community game: it's very difficult to pick up an action from high distance without filtering what's missing with opinion. Match officials must not add or subtract facts from an incident using their opinion. They must only operate using the facts they have available to them. In this case, off-field investigation was required. However, the same process was followed. Has head contact occurred? Yes. The player entering the ruck made contact with the head of an opponent. Was there foul play? Yes. They entered the ruck at high speed. The level of danger is high as there is direct head contact with the head of an opponent, and mitigation does not apply as the player entered the ruck with clear line of sight and no clear and obvious change in dynamic. Once again, the head contact process must be based on facts. Officials must use what's available to them. In community rugby, technology and the use of video replay is not available during the game, however, can be made available after the game. At any rate, we ask members of the community to be cognizant of this and not to speculate appropriate sanctions for head contact with opinion. Finally, we'll look at the use of yellow cards in context, specifically repeated infringements versus intentionally offending under pressure. Contextual refereeing of any phase of the game can be boiled down to awareness of pressure, namely who is under pressure and what are they going to do to cope with that pressure. Pressure is often a result of small actions that lead to big moments. Here we see a yellow card decision as a result of pressure. The pressure came from a partial line break leading to a 3-on-1. The defender of the 3-on-1 tries desperately to prevent a pass from occurring by sticking their arm out in front of them. In order to give the time and space required to make an easy to understand decision, we must ask, as that line break is developing, who is under pressure and what are they going to do to cope? By continuing to develop game understanding, officials will be able to more quickly identify the player and the relevant action that is going to become under pressure. Identifying who and what is under pressure can be an indicator of which decision becomes likely. However, being aware of how much pressure can assist with the escalation of sanction, yellow card, and so on. One way is to use the microscope, nuts and bolts, judge, and massive element approach. If one side is clearly under pressure, but there's possibility to overcome, an approach that the action must clearly be legal must be taken. If one team has the slight upper hand, a nuts and bolts priority sequence can be adopted. For all things foul play or equal pressure, a more literal interpretation may be appropriate. And finally, when massive pressure is on one team or one player, and it's virtually impossible for them to overcome without infringing, we must use the massive pressure approach. Going back to the example of the deliberate knock-on, we see a 2-on-1 with lots of space. This would be a microscope approach. The player is likely to infringe, but has the possibility to legally overcome. The player puts an arm out, is unable to regather the ball, and therefore has infringed. Given the amount of pressure that the offending team was able to alleviate due to the illegal action, escalating the penalty to a yellow card would be appropriate. Intentionally offending under pressure is part of the foul play key focus areas. However, the key to making good decisions and not overreacting to actions that are not worthy of a yellow card is reading the pressure before the infringement has occurred. To summarize recent trends in the game and offer some potential solutions of high penalty count for off feet and side entry, inconsistent head contact process outcomes, and inconsistent use of yellow cards. For players and coaches, more awareness from the Jackler and better accuracy in support lines entering the breakdown. The solutions on the refereeing side, a better understanding of what in a position to lift the ball looks like, and more awareness of collision types prior to the tackle occurring. For players and coaches, more awareness of body position and targeting lower end tackles. On the refereeing side, identifying upright carriers and tacklers before collisions occur in order to gather facts relevant to the head contact process. Finally, on the player and coach solution side, big picture discipline, leaving dead rucks, acknowledging referee leave it calls, or when they are about to get the ball back from a handling error or from a kick. This can be done by taking an extra step back in those situations, leaving the ball on the refereeing side, a higher management work rate at dead rucks or lost causes, stronger positions to reduce the general penalty count, and a higher awareness of who's under pressure and what they may do to cope with that pressure. On the bcrugby.com website, under resources for officials and coaches, Jackler and arriving player key focus area videos are available, as well as a summarized version of the head contact process and practice clips. And finally, there are clips on Coach Logic to review the process for identifying who's under pressure and what they're going to do to relieve it. On the bcrugby.com website, if you tap or click on the 3 lines, a menu bar will appear. Scrolling down to resources and clicking or tapping on coaches and officials will bring you to the resource page. At the very top, there are some video resources on tackler and arriving player, as well as Jackler. Scrolling down to the bottom, the full key focus areas video map is available. Clicking on each tile will give you the video exercise relevant to each area. And there are summaries of contextual priorities and playlists directly linked to our YouTube channel, organized by key focus area.